We're coming to the end of the summer of 1742 here in Mistral by Red Sash Games, and we have a battle, or a potential battle, over here off the coast of Italy. So the Spanish flotilla there the Neapolitan flotilla there is trying to conduct operations to support the Bourbon War in the Apennines, I think it is, and the British want to stop them. So both sides have a reason to stick around and fight, and searched for each other, and have both found each other. As you can see, they're both flipped up, so they're both spotted in the same area, and we're going to have run through the steps of a battle again. So I'm going to crack on with that and see what happens. This may take some stopping and starting because it's the first battle that I've gone through. So, and of course, one side may get the wind gauge and decline battle, but in that case, certainly if it were the Spanish, the British aren't going to get the wind gauge and decline battle. If the Spanish get the wind gauge and decline battle, they'll have to move off the space, and therefore they won't complete their orders. So they're probably not going to do that, having stuck around this far. Let's see though. Determine if a battle can take place is the first step. Well, it can. We've got spotted formations in the same space. Pause the impulse, announce initially engaged formations. We've got two engaged flotillas. Determine the weather gauge. Okay, let me find the table for that and come back. Okay, here's the weather gauge chart. So for the Spanish, they're on station, so they've got 10 minus 5 is 5. And they've got their formation leader's leadership rating, which is a 2. They've got 7. The British have got 10 minus 5 because they are also stationary in the same area, so they've got 5. And they've got the formations leadership rating. Haddock has a 4, so they have 9, and the British have the weather gauge. Okay, what happens next? Declare all withdrawals. No one's withdrawing. Determine battle reinforcements. There's no one else around to do any reinforcing, so we will ignore that. Assign leaders to squadrons. Okay, we're going to have to kind of have a look at what forces we've got. But what we're then going to do is declare a battle intensity, determine a damage level, arrange our squadrons into combats, determine the modifiers, consult the damage table, and then resume the impulse. Okay, let's go through this step by step. Okay, I've set out the forces that we've got in play down here with markers to show their current damage points. So the Spanish or the Bourbon player has got squadrons F and G, each with 4 damage points on them currently, being led by this guy here, Liano. And the British have also got squadrons F and G with 4 and 5 damage points on them, being led by Haddock. So we have to assign leaders to individual squadrons. So we'll say that Liano is just going to stick with F, and Haddock is going to be on as part of the squadron with the lowest damage point, G. So that's that bit done. We are going to declare the battle intensity. So the side with the wind gauge gets to choose whether they want the battle to be light, medium or heavy in intensity, and these numbers on this table show which column of the damage table we'll use for damage to either side. So if the battle's heavy, then we're going to use a much higher column on the damage in terms of inflicting damage on the ships than if we have light. However, this is modified by the personality of each commander. So the British want to cause damage and are picking a heavy intensity battle. But we're now going to look at the personalities of the opposing commanders. Haddock here has the wind gauge. You can see he's got a yellow downward facing triangle. 2 yellow facing triangles down is timid, 1 down is cautious, 1 up is aggressive. Actually they're red if they go up, so a red upward facing triangle is aggressive and 2 upward facing triangles is rash. So you've got a scale: cautious, timid, cautious, aggressive, rash. He is cautious. Liano has 2 downward facing yellow triangles, so he is timid. So if we go over to this table, we can see that the Admiral with the wind gauge is cautious, and the Admiral defending is timid, and we get a -2 column shift on the intensity table, which automatically takes us down to light. So a cautious leader against a timid leader, just not willing to commit many ships, or not willing to really get into the thick of it, maybe taking shots at each other from range, who knows what it means, but certainly not willing to commit to a full-throated battle. So we are going to be on this table here, and now what I believe we do is roll a 10-sided dice, and that will determine which column on the combat damage table we are on. So yes, determine the damage level is the next step. Let's grab a 10-sided dice. We rolled a 3, and that means we are on column 2. So on this combat damage table we'll be using column 2 here to determine how much damage the ships take. Right, let me pause here and get things arranged for the next step. Okay, so the next thing we do is arrange the opposing squadrons into individual battles, squadron versus squadron. Here we've got a very neat symmetry because we've got 2 versus 2. If one side had more squadrons, then they could obviously then assign their extra squadron to fighting, something, outnumbering one of the enemy. Also of note, is this top right figure. This is the number of squadrons this commander can actually command. So Liano 2, Haddock 3, so we've got no problems with command either. Again, if there were more squadrons around than their command rating, then there'd be problems on that score, but neither side have those problems. So we've essentially got F against G, G against F here, and we roll the dice and just on column 2, as we've already determined, and apply those damage results to either squadron. And it's as simple as that. However, there are some modifiers and column shifts. So in this case, Haddock has got 4 leadership and Liano only has 2. You take the difference, which is obviously 2, and halve it, 1, and the side with the higher leadership can apply that as a column shift either to themselves or against the enemy. What that means is that Haddock can say that they are using 3 and the French are, the Naples fleet is using column 2, or he could say he's using 2 and the Naples fleet is using column 1. He's going to go for that option. He's going to apply damage on column 2 and Naples on column 1. I'll check whether that applies to all the combats or whether it only applies to one, and then have a look at rolling some dice. And in answer to that question, the leadership only applies to an individual combat, so each of these is an individual combat. So they've got a one column, the British have a one column shift in this combat here, and there's no shifts in this one here, so we're using tables 2 for the British and 1 for the French. I keep saying French. 2 for the British and 1 for the Naples fleet here, and 2 and 2 here, and you just make one die roll. You don't each make a die roll and apply it separately. You make one die roll and apply it to both sides. So here we go, the first combat. We've rolled another 3, and what that means is that the British ships are going to suffer 1 point of damage and the Naples ship 2. So let's just apply that here. It goes up to 5 and goes up to 6. Okay. And then this combat is going to be on the 2-2, on the 2 column for both. We've rolled a 9, and that's no damage applied to either side. And that's it. Now let's work out what that means. Okay, well, in the case of this battle here, the victor in a battle is determined by the side which sunk the most enemy sail. When there's no sail sunk, there is no victor. Either side, both sides can just carry on going about their business. In the case of battles which are medium or high intensity, both sides are disorganized after a battle, and to become undisorganized you have to either make a leadership check with your admiral or return to port. But we have no disorganisation here because it was a light intensity battle. However, there is one last thing to do, because the British have a fire ship in their flotilla and are going to take the opportunity to see if they can use it, so I'll come back with that. So the British have this fire ship auxiliary as part of their force, which they're allowed to use as part of the battle, assign as part of the battle. Essentially you can pick a squadron to target, and it's very good against weak squadrons and get increasingly poor against stronger squadrons, because to affect the enemy squadron you have to roll equal or greater to twice the number of sail in that squadron. So a squadron with 1 sail you could affect on a 2 or more, but with 4 sail, as both of these have, you need an 8 or a 9 on the dice. But still, they're here, they've got it, they might as well use it. So they're firing that fire ship over into this squadron to see if they can have any effect with it. They need an 8 or 9 on the dice. They've got a 4, and it just goes into the recovery box. And we are done. I think we now have both fleets occupying the same space. They probably become unspotted and have to search for each other again. So let's see what happens next. Okay, so over here in the Adriatic, these two, the British and the Neapolitan navies, clashed again. They stayed in the same space for the next increment. The rules suggest that you don't become unspotted if you remain in a battle space, and they were in the same space where the Neapolitan fleet remains. So there was another round of battle following exactly the same procedures that I put on film last time, only the roll was a bit lower, and so the intensity of that battle was slightly higher. The Spanish squadrons took 4 damage and 2, the British took 3 and 2. That put the British squadrons into the sort of danger zone as far as damage is concerned, 7 and 8. They've got a limit of 10 before they have to start rolling to sink. And also
that's over 2/3 of their damage, so they're down 1 movement point and down 1 on the wind gauge. The 2 Spanish squadrons are in this flotilla here. They're both on 8 damage, but that's out of 14, so they've still got some leeway in terms of damage. Although I think another point of damage puts them over 2/3 as well. I'd have to check. What's 2/3 of 14? 2/3 of 15 is 10. It's got to be 9-ish. I'll check. So they are close to their 2/3 limit. Both sides now looking to come out of the Adriatic, get back somewhere before the end of autumn. So both, well, certainly the British disengaged and started heading back towards Port Mahon. The Spanish are likely to be following, but what we could see, because the Spanish will be quicker, is some running battles going on down the coast of Italy, Ravenna and places like that, on this Pescara and places like this on this eastern coast of Italy. Elsewhere, there are a couple of French formations limping back to Toulon in a really battered state. There's a troop convoy that isn't assembled. There's a couple of Spanish formations cruising along the North African coast for some reason, and the British are going about completing some orders. So it's mainly what's going on in the Adriatic that's of chief interest. We'll see what happens. So we've had another battle over here. The Spanish caught up with the damaged British ships because they're slower. The Spanish had the wind gauge because they were moving and the British were stationary. So despite Haddock being a better commander, the Spanish had the wind gauge, and that made the battle intensity calculation different, because when a timid commander has the wind gauge and his opponent is cautious, it's -1. So they chose heavy intensity and it ended up on the medium intensity table, but they rolled an 8, and so it only ended up with a 2 on the damage table. But we rolled some very low dice, causing lots of damage to both parties. So yeah, the Spanish now on 11 and 12 DPs for their 2 squadrons. The British on 8 and 12 is over their DP allowance. So they now have to start rolling to see if ships sink. Basically, I think it's a 2 or less, because they've got 12 and their DP allowance is 10. Also, because we've had a medium intensity battle, both sides will be disorganised, and I'll have to check when they can reorganise. I don't know whether it's each movement point increment or whether it's only at the beginning or end of impulses, so I'll have to see. So I'm fairly sure that Squadron G now has to check to see if they lose a ship of the line, and then I have to check to see when they can reorganise. Okay, here's the sunk sail equation. So you subtract the damage rating from the accrued damage point, and then you roll a dice, and if you've got less than or equal to this value, you lose a sail. So they've got 12 damage points on the British squadron. They've got a damage rating of 10. 12 minus 10 is 2. We're rolling a 10-sided dice. And we've got a 7. So we've not got any sail sunk there. And now it's a look to see what the disorganisation effects are. Let's have a look. Disorganisation. After a battle of medium or heavy intensity, all engaged formations are disorganised. Mark them with disorganised chits. Disorganised formations cannot voluntarily participate in battle. And to recover from disorganisation, a formation must either enter fitting out, i.e. go into port, in which case recovery is automatic and instantaneous, or the leader commanding the formation must pass a leadership check at the start of the impulse. So we need to get to the end of the impulse before either of these formations will be able to reorganise sufficiently to fight again. So it's late 1742 here in Mistral. We are in the October turn 14, and things are just drifting back to port now. You can see a detachment there just making its way into Cadiz. We've got some stragglers out trying to make it back to Port Mahon here. The Neapolitan fleet had to go into Palermo, which wasn't ideal because it's a minor port and so doesn't repair only repairs quarterly rather than every turn for the Spanish side, so the Bourbon side. But they had to do that because Naples was blockaded by 4 squadrons of British at the time they were trying to get back, and they needed to get into port somewhere. And they were in no position to fight a battle against the British. So in terms of, one of my cats is at the door, in terms of what's going on, the Bourbon player has completed 6 orders now. The British player has completed 5, so slightly behind. The military campaigns are leaning heavily Bourbon in the Po Valley and heavily Austrian in the Apennines. And we've got no one under orders anymore. Things are just making their way back into port. A couple of Levant convoys that are making their way across the sea, but they're probably not gonna get interrupted by much. Yeah, so the year is kind of winding down because neither side is under any great sort of desire to start taking more orders on and only have a turn or 2 to fulfill them. That looks like a way of just picking up more orders chits that you can't fulfill. Both sides have 1 unfulfilled order chit. In terms of the state of the navies, the British have pretty much everything they've got at Port Mahon now. Some of which is really beaten up, but they've got quite a lot of ships here that are still in a good state of repair. There's a squadron under F there with only 1 damage point, J with 2, B with 3. So they could probably put 4 or 5 relatively undamaged squadrons together should they need to out of Port Mahon, and they're repairing something up at Gibraltar. The Bourbon player can't say the same thing. The squadrons out of Cadiz can't take any more orders this year because the Flotta event came in, so that locks them down, and they've got a squadron away in the West Indies, which will come back in the spring next year, but with lots of damage on it, so won't be usable for a while. Nothing in Cartagena or Barcelona. Well, they've got a 3-ship squadron. Okay, they've got something that could go out and do a minor mission in Barcelona. The French also have a lot of damage on them, I believe. They've got a reasonably undamaged squadron here, 2 damage on it. They've got a... Oh, okay, they have got some undamaged squadrons kicking around in Toulon. That's good for them, and good for the Bourbon player because the ability of the French to pick off orders knowing that they're going to be unhindered by the British is really quite powerful. But yeah, that's pretty much the only ships they've got that are seaworthy at the moment. Or not under orders, not to go anywhere like the Spanish fleet in Cadiz. So that's where we are coming into the end of 1742. And yeah, I think the remaining 2 turns are going to be pretty much administration, getting stuff, the last stragglers back to port, making repairs, and there's a victualling convoy for the British that's nearly full that they will be trying to get into Gibraltar and then on to Port Mahon, so that they can try and get their fleet in really good shape for the sailing season in 1743.